Hi guys, how are you all today morning? Good morning. Today is 1st September 2023. My name is TSV Raghavan and I live in Chennai, Tamil Nadu, India. This is my spiritual vlog on YouTube. Hardan, 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 Haribol, TRSV, Nectar, NECTAR, Nectar. In this particular vlog, in all my previous videos, we have been discussing about the knowledge and information that we have gleaned through the study of spiritual books, scriptures, contemplation on the material universe, and meditation on the spiritual universe. This particular video in this vlog is no exception to that rule. In fact, it is a mere continuation of all that we have been doing in my previous videos and which we will do in my future videos. Kindly subscribe to my vlog and press the bell icon so that I may keep reminding you of all my previous and future videos. So let us continue with the topic of discussion for today's video. Till now, we know how the material world, when it gets connected with the spiritual, gets visibly irritated by this reaction and hence begins enveloping this spirit soul with four layers of the material body. These four layers of material body are: the first layer of causal body of intelligence and logic, astral body of feelings, emotions, and mind, the etheric body of senses, namely sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch, and finally the fourth layer called gross body, which is made up of four natural elements, namely fire, air, water, and earth. It is this gross body that that identifies a living entity in the material world as an individual living entity, whether it is the cell, an algae, an amoeba, a weed, a grass, a creeper, a plant, a tree, an amphibian, worm, insect, reptiles, beasts, and finally human beings. Every one of these living entities is identified by his, its, or her gross body. What is a living entity? A living entity is a complete parcel of a spirit soul entrapped into a cocoon of four layers of the material body. That is known as a living entity. Yes, there are several living entities who may exist in this material world without a gross body. They also are called living entities, but here we will only talk about those which have also donned a fourth layer called the gross body. When this living entity comes into picture at the first time, then this living entity sooner or later gets into an orbit of a cycle of endless births and deaths in this material world. This endless cycle, which is seemingly endless, comes to an end only when this living entity ultimately realizes that it is not this body but the original spirit soul, gets evolved, gets experienced and intelligent enough to try for liberation from this repeated cycle of birth and death. This is known as liberation. The final stage is when a liberated spirit soul comes to its original position as an evolved spirit soul and finally gets delivered into the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, we will talk about these things later in my other videos. But today we are trying to find out a connection between the subtle bodies, the gross body, and the imaginary Kundalini serpent and chakras which are present at the vertebral column of a human living entity. But before doing that, I would like to delve on this topic in detail a little bit. There are four layers of material body. Of these four, three are very subtle and are made up of the first element in the material world, which is known as ether. The gross body is made up of other four elements, namely air, fire, water, and earth. When such a thing occurs, there comes into existence and picture a mass of tissues that occupies the top of the cranium of a living entity, especially a human living entity. This mass of tissue is known as the brain. The brain is the main institute and conduit between the rest of the gross body and the three previous layers of subtle body. This particular brain is just like a hard disk in a computer. The hard disk of a computer or a mobile phone makes this particular computer or mobile phone work. Similarly, this brain is responsible for the actions and reactions of a gross body. How does this happen? As I said, there are three subtle bodies. As soon as a living entity, especially human, is born, vibrations from these three subtle bodies begin to emanate out of these subtle bodies and are automatically transmitted to this brain. This brain, according to the destiny, karma, surroundings, atmosphere, upbringing, and evolvement of that particular living entity, masticates or chews upon some chosen vibrations from one or more of these subtle bodies. When it does so, a juice is extracted. When this juice is extracted by the brain, it percolates these particular juice into the rest of the gross body. When the juice is thus percolated, then the body acts according to what juice has percolated down that gross body. This is quite an interesting but complex process. In one lifetime, vibrations from causal intelligence of logic, astral mind, feelings, emotions, and etheric senses percolate down the body of a particular living entity through its brain. Thus, we may safely say that a permutation and combination of the juice of the emanation of vibrations from all three bodies are percolated down that gross body. There is another factor which is known as a catalyst that pastes or increases the reactions of such emanations. This is known as false ego. False ego is when a particular living entity identifies himself, herself, or itself with the four layers of the body which is material in nature. It conveniently forgets that it is originally just a spirit soul. This ego plays a major part in the permutation and combination of vibrations that get transmitted into that mass of tissue called brain in the gross body of a human living entity. This mass of tissue has trillions of cells, nerves, and veins within it. They are responsible for processing all the messages or vibrations that are sent to it through the subtle bodies of causal intelligence, astral mind, and etheric senses. Now, what vibrations are selected and processed and the juice extracted and percolated down the body of a living entity depends on several factors. These factors are as follows. It all depends on destiny, karma, evolvement, intelligence, education, experience, taste, preferences, choices, and circumstances, surroundings, etc., that affect this particular transmission and processing of vibrations of a subtle body, along with the ego that forms part of the whole process. As I mentioned above or before, ego or false ego plays a very important role in bridging the gap between the vibrations between all the three subtle bodies. In one lifetime, in various circumstances, a living entity may use the vibrations from one particular subtle body or more of them. The possibility is that its choice and processes depending upon the choice and the preferences depending upon the factors mentioned before depend or are the basis for the choice of vibrations from one or more subtle bodies. We will talk about the relationship between this process and the Kundalini serpent and the Kundalini chakras of a particular human living entity. Yesterday, in my previous video, we talked about the introductory part of this theory. Today, we will delve a little further into this subject. What is Kundalini? Kundalini is actually subtle and imaginary. It does not have a physical form. The Kundalini serpent is actually a subtle and imaginary dormant serpent which is tightly coiled and lies as a tightly coiled rope at the base of the vertebral column of the gross body of a living entity. It does not exist. It is just imaginary and subtle, but it has a lot of effect on the psyche and the performance of the living entity because it is directly connected to the three layers of the subtle body. This Kundalini serpent is dormant, but it is actually a reservoir of energy. This energy can be activated only by arousing that dormant, tightly coiled Kundalini serpent. This is done by the living entity through various forms of yoga, mainly karma yoga, hatha yoga, tantra yoga, mantra yoga, jnana yoga, dhyana yoga, bhakti yoga, and the yoga which is known as hatha yoga or the ashtanga yoga. These yogas are used to activate this particular serpent and to make it travel through the vertebral column of the living entity's gross body. Various types of yogas are used to make this Kundalini serpent travel through that vertebral column. It is used to motivate that particular Kundalini serpent to travel or slither through that vertebral column's tube. In that tube exist at regular intervals at least 7 stations where this Kundalini serpent rests after it slithers and reaches those stations. These seven places or stations are known as imaginary chakras, which are round in nature, horizontal, rotating, and are placed at regular intervals in the vertebral column of the living entity. These seven chakras are known as first, which is at the base of the spinal cord, also called Mooladhara chakra. The second is known as Swadhisthana chakra. The third chakra is known as Manipuraka chakra. The fourth is known as Anahata chakra. The fifth is known as Vishuddhi chakra. The sixth is known as Agya chakra, and the seventh and final one is known as Sahasrara chakra. Depending upon the evolvement of a particular living entity, this particular Kundalini serpent slithers through the tube of the vertebral column or spinal cord and rests in one particular chakra. Please allow me to repeat this. Which chakra that Kundalini serpent prefers to rest in depends entirely on the destiny, karma, and evolvement of a particular human living entity. The more evolved that living entity is, the higher this Kundalini serpent will go and reach a higher chakra to rest. Here, we should go into this through another detour or a bypass. This bypass is known as three modes of material nature. These three modes of material nature are known as goodness, passion, and ignorance. Depending upon the environment, destiny, karma, upbringing, taste, and preference of a human a living entity, he or she has one particular form of material nature. Either it is goodness or passion or ignorance. This plays a large part or a very important part in the complete process of the processing and percolation of vibrations from the three subtle bodies into the gross body, plus where this Kundalini serpent will rest among the chakras, seven in number, plus the actual nature of that particular living entity. Here, to make things more easy to understand, I have tried to make a pair each of the first six chakras of the Kundalini. Mooladhara chakra and Swadhisthana chakra are etheric senses in nature, and hence they are more dependent on the etheric body of senses. The Manipuraka chakra and the Anahata chakra are more evolved and are more dependent on the astral mind of feelings and emotions. The Vishuddhi chakra and the Agya chakra are more connected to the causal body of intelligence and logic. And the final Sahasrara chakra, though seemingly material, is directly connected to the original identity of a living entity, especially, namely, that of a spirit soul. Now, I have tried to connect this particular process with the three modes of material nature. I feel that the first two chakras, namely Mooladhara and Swadhisthana, are also connected to the mode of ignorance. The Manipuraka and Anahata chakras are more connected to the mode of passion, and the Agya chakra and the Vishuddhi chakra are more connected to the goodness mode. Finally, Sahasrara chakra is connected to the monkish rishi, maharishi, sannyasi, renunciant, heretic, and totally spiritual type of a living entity. This is one basis on which I am going to discuss in detail in my future videos also. Here it would suffice that we connect all three together in the following forms: Mooladhara, Swadhisthana, etheric body of senses and ignorance mode. Similarly, Manipuraka Anahata astral mind of feelings and emotions plus the passion mode. Similarly, the Vishuddhi chakra, the Agna chakra, the mode of goodness and this vibration from the causal body of intelligence and logic. This is the three sets of feelings, emotions, or understanding and evolvement of a particular living entity in this material world. We shall talk about this theory in detail in my future video. Kindly let me know what you think of my talk on this particular matter. Please give me your own expert views, thoughts, ideas, and feelings so that I may blend everything together for the sake of this society. Before concluding, let me remind you that I am also a published author with Amazon Kindle and paperback. I write on spiritualism, fiction, and assorted subjects. Spiritualism happens to be my favorite subject. Till we meet in my next video, it is good morning from TSV Raghavan.